grace of Jesus Christ, the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with you all. Amen. I have gotten to the point where I can't remember what I have told you as intros. So if this is a repeat, deal with it. Because it's not just a repeat. It's actually happened this past week. I was driving down to pick up Holly, and a song came on the radio, and it took me right back to high school. I will not tell you the name of the band nor the song, so that I can stay innocent. However, this song has become so much a part of who this band is that every time they close one of their concerts, the very last encore song is this song. And the first time I saw them live, I was in awe. Because, every sort of song you wanted to hear was played at this point, and you know what's coming next, and the guitar riff kicks in, and 6 Civil War cannons rise up from the stage. And the whole point of the song is they're giving a 21-gun salute to the next generation of rock and rollers, so to speak. They're passing on the torch. They're firing off shots for those who are about to rock, so to speak. And it's this really cool moment, and it's this really cool idea, and I've always loved the song because of that sort of notion of passing the torch from one generation to the next. Because that's not always an easy thing to do. It's easy with what sports team you're going to love, and right now that's okay for me because the Bears are doing better than the Ravens. How often do you say that? But it's easy with that kind of stuff. It's a lot harder when it comes to something like, you're going to retire and let someone else in your office do your work, or when you're a pastor and it's time to let go and move on. I'm not letting go and moving on, I'm just using it as an example. It's always difficult at some point in your life when you realize you're not getting any younger, and it's up to the next generation to sort of carry things forth, whether that's family traditions or passions or whatever. It's not always easy to come to grips with that. To come to grips with the fact that you're not going to be doing this forever. Younger people go like, yeah, I am. I'm only 18. I was only 18 yesterday. Now I'm 30. It goes quick. It's one of those things that is never an easy pill to swallow. And Paul seems to be doing a pretty good job of swallowing that pill in our epistle lesson. Today is the day we commemorate St. Luke, and I'll say more about that toward the end. But the reason why these texts were picked is because they all sort of fit together. This epistle text actually mentions Luke a little bit, that Luke is kind of the only one hanging out with Paul. But that's not really the point of 2 Timothy. The point of 2 Timothy is to pass on the responsibility to Timothy from Paul. Because Timothy is actually a pastor in Ephesus, and 1st and 2nd Timothy are kind of Paul's way of telling him what he needs to know, to keep things central that need to be central. And as you sort of read through them, you get the feel for them, especially in 2 Timothy. And what Paul passes on to Timothy is not always happy. Put it to you that way. Because, Paul sort of realizes he has run the race, he has kept the faith, right? He has finished the fight, so to speak. He knows that in the resurrection he will get his reward, but that wasn't an easy road. In fact, he is, at this point in time, he's alone with Luke, and things were hard, and that coppersmith gave Paul some trouble. And guess what, Timothy? That coppersmith is probably going to give you trouble too. What he is passing on to Timothy is this notion that the work's about to get tough. Suffering is part of the job, Timothy. It happened to me, it's going to happen to you. And he sort of entreats him to endure it. He doesn't tell him to escape it. He warns him it's coming, not so that he can sort of avoid it, but so that he can stand neck deep in it. Our Old Testament text is one that I love, and that's because of how it sort of plays into New Testament stuff. And I know I've shared this with you before, but I'm going to do it again to make the same point I made the first time I shared it with you. And that is, when John the Baptist is in prison, John the Baptist is not going to outlive his sentence. He is going to lose his head. And he is in prison, and he is doubting whether this Jesus is the one who was to come, or if there is going to be another. And so he sends his disciples to Jesus, and they say, hey, John the Baptist wants to know if you're the guy. Now think about that for a minute. Jesus himself said, none of woman born is greater than John the Baptist. John the Baptist is Jesus' cousin. He leapt in the womb when Mary and Elizabeth said hi to each other. If there is anybody in the New Testament that should know that it's Jesus, it's John the Baptist, the guy who prepared the way, and he is doubting. He sends his disciples. And Jesus doesn't answer right away. He goes and does a bunch of things. He does what our Old Testament text says the Messiah is going to do when he comes on the scene. He unstops the tongue of the mute, the lame leap like a deer, the blind see, and Jesus does all these things. He says, go tell John what you have seen. Now, we don't know what John says in reference to that, but the point has been made. Jesus is the guy. He gives John confidence. He doesn't give John release. He doesn't go over to Herod's jail cell and spring John from prison. He actually lets John sit with the confidence that Christ is the one who's going to overcome all things. And I think that's the tough thing that we need to wrap our heads around. Whether it's Paul, John the Baptist, there is this reality that kind of whether you like it or not, God's going to let you sit with some pretty tough things. He is not just going to give you the best and the greatest and the most wonderful things in life. He's going to let it hurt. He's going to let you suffer. And there are Christians who would disagree with me on that point, and they would say, well, look, Jesus says, I have come that you may have life and have it abundantly. Or look at this verse that says, I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you and not to harm you. That means God's going to give you great things. He's just going to give you victory. Well, aside from the fact that they're probably misunderstanding those texts, and if you want to talk about that, we've got time after church. The point is, that's not how it works in the New Testament. Time and again, that is the opposite of how it works. You don't get to escape suffering if you are following Christ. It comes calling, and it hurts. John the Baptist, Paul, most likely Timothy. Look at all the disciples. Oh, and actually look at Jesus Christ himself. Kind of the biggest evidence I can show you that means, if you're following in his train goes to the cross. Who at the cross, isn't smiling and happy because it's victorious. No, he is crying out the cry of dereliction. My God, why have you forsaken me? And it's not just words. He's not just fulfilling the psalm. He is actually forsaken in that moment. He is alone, broken and bleeding and dying. That is Christ's lot. And sure, Easter follows. But that doesn't mean you get to escape the cross. Suffering is a part of the game. It's a part of what it means to be a disciple. Jesus doesn't promise you you're going to escape it. Paul never escaped it. Paul warns Timothy he's not going to escape it. What he tells Timothy is, endure it. And that kind of is twofold for us. There's the reality that you're going to suffer because you're a Christian, meaning you're going to suffer because you have this message, right? You have the gospel that has been given to you, that you are Christ, that He is yours, and that there's, this gospel message that is supposed to come out of you, and the world's not going to like it, and they're going to persecute you for it. That's true. That's only one half of your suffering. The other half is suffering as a parent, right? The other half is suffering, because you're sick, or because something's wrong, physically, mentally, emotionally. You're going to suffer as a person. You're not going to get some sort of free pass. It's going to be difficult to get your kids to listen to you. It's going to be difficult to have those relationships at work. It's difficult to live sometimes. It's difficult to get out of bed sometimes. You're going to suffer for all of these reasons. You don't get to escape it. So does that mean we just walk out and shucks? You just have to endure it? No, the hope that we have is not a hope that it's going to go away. It's a hope that keeps us stable throughout. Because the hope is not you're going to escape suffering in the here and now. That wasn't even Paul's hope in our epistle lesson. The hope is actually that on the last day, you're going to receive that crown. On the last day, when the veil of tears is lifted, all that stuff that hurts you and breaks you down and makes you cry is actually going to go away for good. But not until then. And so we struggle. But we don't struggle alone. When we cry out, my God, why have you forsaken me in the midst of our struggles? We're identifying with the one who suffered most. So that's kind of the point. We follow the way of the cross. The way of suffering and death and struggle. The way that realizes we're not always going to get what we want, that it's not always going to be happy and fun and roses and sunshine. Life is going to hurt. But the way through the cross ends up walking out of a tomb 3 days later. And it may not be 3 days from now that Christ returns, but that day is coming. The day that even reality has to listen to, when the eyes of the blind are open and the tongue of the mute sings for joy and the lame leap like a deer, when all things are made right. That day is coming. When your feet won't hurt anymore. When it's not a struggle to get out of bed. That is in your future by virtue of the fact that Christ has made you His own at the font, at this rail. And until that time, it is our job to pass that on to the next generation. Not the desire to escape suffering, but the call to endure it. Luke understood that. In fact, if you read Luke and Acts, the point is partially, this is not going to be easy. This was not easy. The church has never had it easy, and the church is never going to have it easy. The church's way is the way of the cross. A cross that leads to death, and from death to life. Amen.